I thought Bowman was sleazy. It really revealed him as a sellout.
Jimmy's a fucking clown, yo.
F you if you diss me, yo. This whole homeboy act is really insulting to the Black working class.
The reason why I put Rashida Tlaib separately, she didn't in fact endorse Joe Biden.
Cringing to Biden, there's this video where he says, I want to be like you. That's a person who is acting completely without self-respect.
You keep criticizing them because they're rich, but they are self-made men. Trump would be insane to not want to include them in our administration.
And I want to believe that the audience can see through it. But I looked at that comment section and girl, I don't know.
Same with Bernie Sanders. He's also trying to channel people back into the Democratic Party. Fundamentally, that's the problem.
All right. It's always such a pleasure to have on Bad Faith Podcast former Seattle City Councilwoman Kshama Sawant, one of the few leaders on the left that has been sort of unflagging and consistent and incredibly disciplined as we try to chart our way forward in this sort of post-Bernie left world. Welcome back to the podcast, Kshama.
Glad to be back here. Nice to see you, Briahna.
It's always such a pleasure. Look, the elephant in the room, at least as far as I'm concerned, is that we most recently did an episode with former Representative Jamaal Bowman. It came out on Monday. If you haven't taken a listen to it already, or if you're not a subscriber, and you've only heard the public 30 minutes of the 90-minute interview that we put for free on Bad Faith YouTube, I encourage you to listen to all of it, because for me, it was a moment that was a long time coming. For years, I have wanted to get on the record and know for sure what was going through the squad members' heads as they had what in retrospect was the largest sort of potential coalition of progressives in the House that we have had in modern history. What their plans were, how much they were willing to act as a squad, and in particular, what their thinking was around the choice not to act on the force the vote moment, given that that was the opportunity where their number would have made a difference because of the small margin that Democrats had over Republicans in the House at the time. Their votes were dispositive. And so the question was what they were going to do with that leverage and that opportunity. And I can't speak for the audience, although the comment section suggests that they felt very similarly as I did, which is that it was dispiriting, if not surprising, to discover that it seems like what was driving at least Jamaal Bowman in part, and I suspect many members of the squad, was a sense of interpersonal frustration with various personalities on the internet, that they didn't have the sort of emotional maturity or sense of scope, scale, and purpose to sort of meet the moment. And then after the force the vote moment passed, continued to, I would argue, put misplaced trust in the Democratic Party as an organization that would be more interested in working towards shared goals than crushing the left. And so after that interview, I found myself desperate for a sort of, dare I say, palate cleanser, just to talk to someone who has so consistently had a more adversarial view of politics, and in my view, a much more realistic understanding of what to expect from both corporate parties. So I want to turn it over to you, Kshama, and give you an opportunity to sort of respond to that and what you made of what parts of the interview you managed to watch. Was any of it surprising? What was your reaction?
I watched almost all of the full interview, Briahna, and none of it was surprising. I have to say parts of it were pretty disgusting to me. Nothing was surprising to me, but it was disgusting to see Jamaal Bowman slither around and deflect on every single point. And we can talk about it. Force the vote obviously was one of the most important points there, because I don't think that force the vote was the only moment for any type of fight back. If there was a desire, a stomach for a fight back within anybody inside the Democratic Party, which itself, it's a premise that we in Workers' Strike Back and Revolutionary Workers disagree with, but hypothetically, were there to be stomach, then I don't think that's the last chance at all. Right now, the Democrats that want to fight could actually be fighting Trump in many different ways, but they aren't doing that. And force the vote, in my view, was not like the sole example, but what it did do was, because big sections of the left, big sections of working class people took on that demand, it succeeded in exposing the inherent flaw in expecting that the squad would do anything to fight for us. So that's the value of the squad, and it sort of relates to also this really dishonest question that Bowman asked you: do you think the squad were a net positive? And I thought your answer was spot on, which is they're a net positive because of the lessons they offer about what the nature of the Democratic Party is and what careerism looks like, even among those whom you might imagine have good intentions. And even that, I think, is questionable at this point among some of the squad members. But setting intentions and psychology aside, what actually happens in the Democratic Party was very much revealed through the whole Force the Vote episode. And where I think we need to draw the most clarity about is, again, this is where I thought I thought Bowman was sleazy throughout the interview. And it really revealed him as a sellout for anybody who's really caring to listen, you sort of read between the lines, so to say, or has some experience since Force the Vote with how the Democrats betray.
Do you think it was a good idea to vote for Nancy Pelosi uncritically without any demands?
We had no plan. Do you think the squad is a net positive for the left?
An interesting question.
Jimmy's a fucking clown, yo. Like, Jimmy was wilding. There's no way in the world that you, Briahna Gray, thinks that everything you've done has been correct. I mean, we gonna keep talking about this though, man. Like,
we love that you're there.
No. It's mad hate.
You wouldn't. I think they were scared of Nancy Pelosi.
Yeah.
Well, I didn't say anything out of pocket. So if you can point to something that I said that was out of pocket, we can discuss it.
Jimmy Dore was the voice of that.
Oh boy, because you guys made him the
True.
voice of it. You chose to ignore a black woman.
Listen.
You don't talk to us. You freeze us out.
Why am I going on shows that all they do is talk shit about us? Why would I do that?
But here's where we need to draw the clarity. I don't believe, even for a second, that the reason, or even part of the reason, that the squad did not actually fight on Force the Vote and completely capitulated to Nancy Pelosi and the Democratic establishment was not because they were upset at Jimmy Dore and Jimmy Dore does not have manners, or, the adversarial left, they don't know how to ask me nicely, and F you if you diss me, yo. This is what, this whole homeboy act that Jamaal Bowman had is really insulting to the Black working class and poor people, tens of millions of them, who don't have access to basics like healthcare, like affordable housing, decent quality education, safe neighborhoods. So all of this is an act, and really the reason that they didn't fight on Force the Vote is because of the price that you have to pay in order to fight for anything. And I think this is another level of clarity, which is, obviously, if you are within the Democratic Party and if you want to fight for working people, then it will make you an enemy of the Democratic establishment, the elite who control the party. But this question is universal, meaning I ran for city council and I won 4 elections as an open socialist. I've never been a part of the Democratic Party. I've never been a member of the Democratic Party. I ran openly declaring that I am against the Democratic Party's allegiance to big business, and we are fighting for working people through our campaign. But my point is that it's not like I was exempted from the fire that is directed at you. If anybody, whether it's an elected representative in city council or US Congress, or somebody in the labor movement, or an unelected leader in social movements, if you have the temerity to actually organize working people in a fight back, then expect to become enemy number 1 of the Democratic Party and the Republican Party, because both of them represent the interests of the elite, of the capitalist class, of big business, of billionaires, all the way from Bezos to Musk. And that is the price that the squad have never, ever been willing to pay. That's at the bottom of why they refuse to do force the vote. That's at the bottom of why most of them, all but one of them, sold out the railroad workers during, when they voted with Biden to break the strike. That is why they have completely failed to do anything for working people.
That's such an important example to recall, the railroad worker strike. What was so frustrating for me, I think, in part was you say that they weren't willing to pay the cost of being attacked and, deplatformed, kicked out of office or whatever by the interest groups that were going to come after them if they did hold the line and if they were genuinely adversarial to the Democratic Party. What's frustrating is that even after the fact, it seems, after someone like Bowman has been kicked out of the party, after APAC spent an unprecedented sum, something like $14 million to get him out of office, and in the wake of that, we can see clear as day that the Democratic Party did nothing to intervene on his behalf, including Black leadership that makes all of this noise about how much they care about the Black caucus and defending identity interests and protecting Black districts and the like. Quite the contrary. They redistricted Representative Bowman's district so that it was no longer as Black as it was, and had no issue whatsoever in letting a Black elected official, like so many others, go by the wayside. And in his case, he wasn't replaced by a Black person. In Nina Turner's case and some others, they just shuffle a new Black person in to cover up the extent to which they have no actual interest in these identity concerns that they claim to care about. But all that being said, even after the fact, there does seem to be this sort of unwillingness from Bowman, or there did seem to be a sort of unwillingness to even have righteous anger toward the party for abandoning him. And I would contrast that with someone like Nina Turner, or even, it seemed, I don't know what she's ultimately going to do with herself, but at least in her remarks immediately after getting kicked out, Cori Bush, who at least seemed in the moment angry enough to be willing to say something akin to the truth about who the Democratic Party really is. Jamaal Bowman, I kept saying to him, you should be madder than anybody else. You should know the lesson here better than anybody else. We want to come to your defense, but it still seems like you'd rather maintain some relationship with the party that did you wrong than those of us whose only criticism of you was that you should have anticipated this better and that you never should have put trust in them to begin with. Not that we are angry at you or hate you or against you. We were trying to warn you that you should be relying on us as a source of power and support and not putting your faith in the Democratic Party.
Just to be clear, Briahna, I wasn't one of them who was not blaming him. I very much blame him for
Sure.
his Iron Dome vote, which is a
Sure.
pro-Israel vote.
Yeah.
I very much blame him for selling out the railroad workers and voting to break their strike. And I very much blame him for his remarks in the interview he did with you where, and to your point, he has no anger against the elite of the Democratic Party who pushed him out. And it was, as you were alluding to, it was the most expensive congressional race ever, I believe. That's how much money APAC spent against him. But that was in the Democratic primary. It's not like the Republicans were spending money against him.
Right.
This is an equal opportunity Zionist force. APAC and the Democratic Party and Republican Party, they're all in cahoots. And so he's not angry at them. Whom is he angry at? Whom was he angry at in the interview he did on bad faith? It was one of the rare occasions where the DSA leadership actually had the right position, which is condemning him for all his anti-Palestine, pro-Zionist votes, for being against railroad workers and so on. So he's angry at them. He's angry at the people who were calling for force the vote. He's angry at any working person who has the courage to try and hold him accountable. So I think that really it tells you what it tells you what the squad looks like. And I understand that. I get your point, and I'm not disagreeing in that Cody Bush did have an angry response, and that's
if you're not willing to do the hard work to shirk the corporate donors in service of everyday people, then how can you call yourself a representative? I will fight for peace and against endless war, for our collective humanity and against our collective demise, even when my persistence bought, and yes, I said bought, my successor the seat with a whole lot of Republican money.
For what it's worth, it's obviously a million miles more respectable than Jamaal Bowman, who is just, it's just cringeworthy to see how much he is kissing up to the Democratic Party after they humiliated and eviscerated him in the primary. That tells you what the politics of the squad overall are. And I think we have to also step back and not just look at Bowman, but overall, what is on offer here from the squad, from Nina Turner. I'm not painting them individuals as in with the same brush, because I think some of them may have good intentions, but that's not the point. And I don't think we should be in the business of psychoanalyzing who have better intentions and who have worse. Ours should be a much more politicized systemic analysis of what is the role that these people are playing, including Rashida Tlaib, by the way. And I don't share your you said that you single her out for exceptional praise when you were talking to Jamaal Bowman. I don't share that assessment, not because I think she's exactly a carbon copy of every other squad member or AOC. She did vote against the railroad workers sellout, and she has spoken up against the genocide. All of that is true. But at the end of the day, I think here is where we need to draw our clarity. Our goal for those of us who are trying to build the strength of working people and build a militant fight back should not be to draw exceptions among gatekeepers or to give praises to gatekeepers who are willing to hold a wider perimeter for working people than other worse gatekeepers. I think our goal should be to clarify the role of all gatekeepers and gatekeeping as a whole, just clarity on what is the role that these people who are there, Nina Turner, Rashida Tlaib, Cody Bush, they're not Chuck Schumer. They are not Nancy Pelosi. They are not Hakeem Jeffries. They're not exactly the same as them. But what is the role they end up playing? The role that they all end up playing is as treacherous gatekeepers against working class movements that ends up giving cover to the Democratic Party. Ultimately, that's the role. So if you look at Nina Turner, it's not like she, after she got completely, again, humiliating defeats by the engineered by the Democratic Party, so that Chantal Brown won the first time, and then again the next year after the special election, in the regular election, again, they defeated Nina Turner. I mean, this is an out-and-out corporate Democrat. She's also Black. Chantal Brown is Black, and she's an out-and-out corporate Democrat. Nina Turner is Black. She was a Bernie-crat. But Nina Turner didn't win. And the reason is that ultimately it's the same as Bowman and Cody Bush and everyone else in the squad, in that they would much rather play sort of a mildly less intense of a role as gatekeeper, but gatekeeper nonetheless, in that they are going to give cover to the Democratic Party. I mean, look at what Nina Turner has done since her defeats in her congressional race. She has launched this "We Are Somebody." It's not like she contacted us and said, let's build Workers Strike Back together, because Workers Strike Back, which I founded in 2023 alongside my fellow socialists in Revolutionary Workers, not in Socialist Alternative, by the way. You said Socialist Alternative in...
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, it's okay.
It's a habit.
I know. I was a member of Socialist Alternative. Many of us who are building Workers' Strike Back were members of Socialist Alternative. Actually, there was a fierce debate because the rest of the leadership of Socialist Alternative was unwilling to take on the, calling out the Democrats. They didn't want to build Workers' Strike Back. They don't want to call out the labor leadership's failures in the way that we are. And so we are in Revolutionary Workers, and we are building Workers' Strike Back, which is a wider organization, a broader organization. And we are actually independent. And you mentioned this correctly, Briahna, that we are independent of the Democratic Party, and we are actually building something. But the Democrats are not part of this. Nina Turner is not part of this. She instead launched, just like Bernie, he launched this oligarchy, against the oligarchy tour and held this event the same day as our big organizing conference, which, by the way, 200,000 people watched. You did an interview with Due Dissidents during that live stream, which I got to watch later. Thank you. But they are, so what are Bernie Sanders and Nina Turner doing? The We Are Somebody that Nina Turner has launched is not an independent fight back organization against the Democratic Party. See, for us, we are not sectarian. You know, in Revolutionary Workers, we are not sectarian, meaning if somebody wanted to fight against the Democratic Party for the working class, we will join them. It doesn't matter which organization it is. But that's not what We Are Somebody is. If you go on the donate link, it takes you to Act Blue. What is Act Blue? It's the Democratic Party's donating arm. If you look at Jamaal Bowman's, he launched this new PAC. He talked about it. I can't remember what it's called. Built to Win. Yeah, it's called Built to Win. He doesn't say this, and it's a sleight of hand on their website, which I'm sure is deliberate. But it's going to be another organ to funnel people back into the Democratic Party. Same with Bernie Sanders. He is also trying to channel people back into the Democratic Party. Fundamentally, that's the problem.
Okay, I want to play devil's advocate a little bit, and I don't want you to hesitate to beat the lib out of me, like to beat the liberal pushback that I'm about to give out of me. But I want to moot this out because I know that we get the following criticism. You know, our corner of the left, the far left, the adversarial left, gets the following criticism. And you heard it a little bit from Jamaal Bowman. That we call people out, we don't call people in, that we erect litmus tests that nobody can pass, and we cordon ourselves off into these elite, self-aggrandizing cohorts that are small and ultimately have no power because we are overly strict and are interested in seeing ourselves as more righteous than other people. So let me, with that criticism in mind, ask you. Well, first I want to say the following. The reason why I put Rashida Tlaib separately is because, one, the votes that you mentioned, her standing apart from the crowd with respect to not voting down the rail worker strike. But also that she didn't, in fact, endorse Joe Biden. That to me was significant. And her willingness to lend her voice to, I think it was, I can't remember if it was Abandon Biden or Abandon Harris at the time, but one of the groups put out an ad in which she was clear that her kind of support was conditional, which for anybody in that kind of pre-election climate was significant, but especially for a sitting Congress member, felt like the sort of break that we wanted minimally from squad members to say, I'm only going to endorse Joe Biden or Kamala Harris if the following conditions are met. And one of those conditions obviously has to be not supporting this genocide. So that did feel like that she was exposing herself differently than others to a certain kind of criticism, and also demonstrating a willingness to actually break from vote blue no matter who cycle that has the country in a vice grip. And the second thing I would say, and I want you to respond to, is if we are saying to Jamaal Bowman, when he says something like, I think Kamala Harris on the inside wanted a better outcome for Palestine. I think she was more receptive. I think she was a good person on the inside. To that, we shake our heads and we're like, oh, who gives a flying fig? There are structural reasons why, even if that's true, her policy was going to be identical to Biden's. And in fact, she said her policy was going to be identical to Biden's. What is it that you're placing faith in? People's feelings inside don't matter. If we understand that's the case with Kamala Harris, I'm interested in taking that lens towards some of these progressives and saying, okay, is Jamaal Bowman a bad faith actor? Are some of these organizations set up by someone like Nina Turner, who again I think also has been breaking free from the vote blue no matter who stuff, to her credit. I don't want to mischaracterize her. I do think it wasn't necessarily immediately after her campaigns, but she, I think, is at a point where she's very much done with the Democratic Party as well. But these organizations, to the extent that they're, funneling people back in the Democratic Party, should we still be in conversation with folks like Jamaal Bowman to say, okay, I disagree with that choice. I'm calling you in. I'm not here to impugn your intentions, but I need to get through to you that strategy is not only useless. It is causing harm because it is demobilizing a cohort that could be joining up with Worker Strike Back and other leftist organizations that are genuinely adversarial and have the power and leverage to push the country in the right direction.
First of all, on Rashida Tlaib, yes, of course, it's a fact that she did not endorse Joe Biden. She has spoken up against a genocide. She, as I said, she was the only squad member who voted not to vote on that sellout bill, voted to vote against rather the sellout bill on the railroad workers strike. And I have no problem, acknowledging facts because those are facts. And yes, that's true. However, facts are one thing, political analysis is another. And so I believe my obligation as a fighter for working people is to offer the analysis, not just, the problem with the problem with putting a spotlight on those facts is that, and without an analysis, is that then it implies an analysis that somehow, because Rashida Tlaib took somewhat better votes, that's our hope. See, that's the part, that's the analytical part that I have a disagreement with, which is that if you don't provide the analysis, that at the end of the day, all of these people, or rather, at the end of the day, none of these people are going to present the starting point of what's needed in this country, which is a militant rank and file uprising, then you're doing a disservice to working people. Because, like I said, if you acknowledging that she took these better votes is one thing, but believing that somehow that's going to be a road to any kind of opening for working people, that is quite another. And the answer to that latter question is emphatically a no. Because, and here's where the analysis comes in, because this is the nature of the Democratic Party. I mean, the Democratic Party and the Republican Party are both representing the capitalist system. I mean, are both representing US capitalism, the US ruling class. And in order to keep working people in check, despite the incredible waves of anger that are floating actually just under the surface. I mean, it's bubbling over, the anger at the cost of living crisis, at the genocide, all the ills of our society under capitalism is just bubbling underneath. But the way a lid is kept on it is by presenting, by as in Chomsky talks about this, by severely limiting the framework of debate and giving people the illusion that you have choices here between the Democrats and Republicans. And then within the Democratic Party, another level of illusion spinning that they do is make you feel, especially now because people, consciousness has moved very much leftwards and people are demanding things. It is in the interest of the Democratic Party to provide sort of, what I would call like a controlled explosion thing. It's to their benefit to have an AOC, to have a Rashida Tlaib. But first of all, let's make it clear, they don't tolerate too much of that. That is the analysis also behind how relentlessly they went after other squad members. They're only going to tolerate a little bit because they don't want too much of it. But at the same time, what you as a Tlaib and what you as an AOC will end up doing will be so severely limiting in the sense that it will not provide any avenue for fight back, because if you even have a hint of using your position to organize people, that's it. They will come after you like you are enemy number one, the way they came after me when I was on the city council for 10 years. That is what's going to happen. So they are, AOC and Tlaib are, whether they're conscious of it or not, I don't know, but I'm not interested in that question. I'm interested in what actually ends up happening. And what does end up happening is that they hold the line themselves where they only do so much of it. They speak up against this or that, they take this or that vote. But at the end of the day, the primary role that they're doing, that they're fulfilling, is giving a sanitized version, offering a sanitized version of the Democratic Party. Because what the reason for them to exist there is so that working people will be lulled into thinking, well, surely if there is a Rashida Tlaib in the Democratic Party, surely the AOC or Bernie Sanders are there then surely the Democratic Party must not be so bad. Maybe there is a hope of reform. And that's what they want. They don't actually want to represent you, but they want you to be in this, suspended in this perpetual state, lulled state of thinking that the Democratic Party is for you. And when it comes to actual challenges by working people, then what do these people do? They lash out at the left, they lash out at working people and show and basically reveal themselves. So that was the value of Force the Vote. It exposed what AOC actually is. And then she actually gave a rare, and I believe you and I talked about this sometime back. She gave a rare, honest answer after the Freedom Caucus used Force the Vote, their own version, the right-wing version of Force the Vote. Obviously, the Freedom Caucus is horrendous, but it's the fact that they proved the lie in the squad by actually doing what we were saying the squad should do in favor of Medicare for all. And in response to that, AOC said, well, that if we had done that, that would cause relational harm.
And it really goes to show how much you need of a coalition in order to really forcefully negotiate for these things. So when people say, why don't we do this? First of all, there's a lot of cost and dysfunction. Second of all, those people who are holding out right now, they may have made certain structural gains, but they have also made incredible reputational and relational harm within their caucus. And so if you are trying to get something done within your caucus moving forward, you still need members of your caucus. And that at the core is an element of electoral politics that is simply inescapable.
Bingo. That is the truth that you will never hear. And she will probably never say this again because she's probably understood that, oh, fuck, I shouldn't have said that. But it reveals that is what happens. See, when you are when you are a prominent leader and you actually stand up for working people, they meaning the Democratic Party, big business, the lobbyists, everybody, they will attempt to make your day-to-day life a living hell. And the only way you can protect yourself from it and also not sell out, not become marginalized, not become irrelevant, not sell out, win victories for working people, because that's the holy grail. That's what we want. That comes only from the kind of political clarity that we had in Seattle. And the crux of that is using your office to build mass movements so that, one, you are never isolated. They can't come after you without coming after tens of thousands of working people. But more importantly, it's not about you. It's not about your career or your well-being. It's about using those movements to win actual victories. And so one of the things I might mention, one of the things that might have been useful in the Bowman interview is to challenge him. He said, we can't win Medicare for all. We can't win 15. And he kept deflecting with dishonest arguments like, are you saying you're perfect? Are you saying you didn't do anything wrong?
Yeah,
that is
crazy.
Bullshit. That is bullshit. That is meant to, it's a way of refusing to answer the question. I think the best way to put him on the spot would have been to say, well, Kshama Sawant and the socialists won $15 an hour in Seattle, despite the opposition of the Democratic Party, despite big business going hard at them against 15, despite everybody, that even the labor leadership really not wanting to fight it, but we forced most of the labor leadership to fight alongside us. There were rare leaders like Paula Lukaczek of the state employees union who fought alongside us, but most of the rest of them, we put our movement, 15 Now movement, put pressure on them. So that's an actual example. So for all the Bowmans and the AOCs who say nothing can be done, we have an answer. Tragically for the working class, it's a rare answer, but we have to use that. And that's why we relentlessly talk about our example in Seattle, not because we're engaging in self-praise, but because it's a concrete, real-life, current-day example of that calls the lie on all these politicians who say, you can't do anything. I'm not perfect. You're not perfect. I mean, that is nonsense. And as far as Tlaib is concerned, honestly, she's also a gatekeeper. If you talk to the activists at Abandon Biden, who are now, who became Abandon Harris, and now obviously I'm sure they'll continue their fight back, they will tell you that behind the scenes, she was gatekeeping against them. Because even there, even in the anger against the genocide, the Democratic parties, the left in the Democratic Party, so to say, I hate calling them that because they're not really the left, but the least, the least doggedly Zionist wing of the party, they did not support uncommitted, but they were willing to tolerate it to some degree because it became a force of itself. With 750,000 people voting uncommitted, that's a force. That then you're forced to contend with it. But that's all they did. They did the minimal type of contending with it that they were forced to do. But then these same people became gatekeepers against the more militant wing, which was like which said we don't want any warmonger. We are not going to vote for a warmonger. Well, the Democratic Party was never ever going to countenance that. So yes, it's one step better than voting for Biden to not vote for Biden, to not endorse Biden. But it is hardly enough. And that's where the problem lies, Briahna. For us, for working people, we cannot point them towards the least common, the least useful thing. We have to raise their sights at what's actually needed. What is actually needed to end the genocide? What is actually needed to win Medicare for all? And for any of this, we need mass movements that are independent of the Democratic Party. And we need a new party for the working class, as Workers' Strike Back is calling for.
I really take that point, and I'm working through this myself because I feel like my hesitation is only that for all that I was accused in the interview with Bowman of sort of being, I guess, mean or overly bombastic or somehow inappropriate in a way that warranted squad members rejecting Force the Vote and also declining to come on progressive shows like mine for the last 4 years plus. I actually think I've done the opposite with the goal of doing what Bowman said, which is to call them in. What I want, and sincerely, I did this after the interview. What I want is for Bowman to understand the logic of what you've just said and the logic of your approach, and to switch gears and to link up with Butch Ware and to link up with you and to link up with independent political organizations to lend his platform, his fame, his notoriety, his relationships in his district to shepherding people not back into the Democratic Party, but away from it. And maybe that is a naive hope. But it does seem to me like at one point, when we were all supporting Bernie Sanders, that was part of the idea. That, and again, as I said in the interview, I think that the last, 4 to 8 years has disproven the idea that the inside part of the inside-outside strategy is effective. That being said, there was this moment where we had hoped at very least, even if the Bernie campaigns demonstrated the Democratic Party would never change, that Bernie himself, having used the platform of running within the Democratic Party as an independent, would then pivot and start and support a third-party independent political organization. And so I guess what's lingering for me is the hope that some of these people who have demonstrated a greater willingness to be adversarial to the Democratic Party, like Rashida Tlaib, could be convinced to leave and to join us. And people like Jamaal Bowman, who've been kicked out, might finally realize that their abuser is not their friend, see the light and come over with us too. And I think that is what makes me want to continue to be a little softer, I guess, in my approach. Not because I want to manufacture consent for the idea that the Democratic Party is good or there are some good actors in it and that it can be saved, but because I want to induce those people who are on the better side of the bad team that they should break ranks and join us to begin with and not make them feel hostile and resentful the way that clearly the squad members did simply because of some bombast around Force the Vote.
For sure, I appreciate everything you're saying. Just on the last thing you said, which I want to come back to, is I don't accept that some bombast around Force the Vote was what was the obstacle. I think that we have an obligation not to accept what people like Bowman say on face value. I mean, he says that, but that's not what the real obstacle was. And as far as I'm concerned,
think so?
Yes, I think so. I know so because this is what I've seen everywhere. And my point is this, Briahna, it doesn't matter how much in their minds was this versus that versus that. Maybe it was a multi-part reason. It doesn't matter because, like I said, we can't be in the business of psychoanalyzing. We have to decipher what strategy is going to work for working people. And we have seen working people try out the Bernie strategy. We have seen working people put illusions in their faith in the squad, not illusions, but faith in the squad. We've seen all those hopes dashed. So my question is an analytical question. How are we going to learn lessons from that, or are we going to keep putting our, keep thinking that, maybe they will be induced? I'll tell you one thing. I'm really glad you did this interview with Jamaal Bowman, because more than anything else, and I don't fault you for that. I appreciate you doing it, because more than anything else, he exposed himself. And it was an hour and a half of Jamaal Bowman exposing what he is a sleazy politician. And I totally, I'm very compassionate to what you were driving at, which is that this accusation by him that people who were doing force the vote were just not very nice. Oh, they're such meanies. Do you know, Briahna, I heard that every day from the Democratic Party. Oh, you're so mean. Oh, they would come to my office and say, I don't disagree with you about this or that renters' rights or about 15, but do you have to be so mean? See, here we have to be ruthless in driving our political analysis, because otherwise they are ruthlessly suppressing working people, and they are ruthlessly attacking the living standards of working people. So when they say, do you have to be so mean? What that's code for, don't call me out, because I want to maintain my progressive sheen as I vote against 15, or as I vote for all the watering down amendments. And we have to deny them that cover, and we have to relentlessly expose them, precisely because if you don't, then they will continue playing, running this illusion manufacturing machine. And those illusions in the Democratic Party, Briahna, are the main obstacle to building militant movement. So it is not because I'm just an especially nasty person. I think I'm a nice person. It's not that I'm a nasty person. It is because that is the single most crucial obstacle that needs to be done away with in order to build militant movements. This illusion in people who sell us out, but just as in a nice way, not in a Nancy Pelosi, this is capitalism kind of way, but in I might be a socialist, but I'm going to fuck you over kind of way. That's what we are talking about. And so I totally, I mean, one of the, you want to talk about mean things? Jamaal Bowman, was being mean to you and the rest of us on the left by saying that we weren't being nice, because you want to know what's not nice? It's tens of millions of people not having basic health care. He talks about Black people. I mean, he's playing this identity politics card. What about the Black people who don't have health care? Do you owe them anything? Do you, set aside Jimmy Dore, do you owe anything to those tens of millions of people who are suffering and continue to have more acute suffering with every passing day while the billionaires rake it in? What do you owe them? And so I think that ultimately, as far as your question is concerned, what will induce these people into leaving the Democratic Party and maybe building the left? It's, first of all, I would say that shouldn't be our starting point. I don't care about them. What I care about is working people. I mean, I can tell you, in the last several months, especially since we left Socialist Alternative, which was a stranglehold on us, building Worker Strike Back, which, as I said, is a nationwide organization. It's fighting for a $25 an hour minimum wage, a free healthcare for all, affordable housing. We want to build this platform, and we want to pick concrete struggles, which we will be doing in the near future. We have grown to 875 members. That might seem small because we are a small organization, Revolutionary Workers, which has launched this. But it is very crucial, because every day we have people joining us saying, I am so angry at the Democratic and Republican parties. I want to build something. And so that's where our attention should be. There's millions of people out there, including people who voted for Trump and may have illusions in him, who want to fight back, who want to fight for something concrete, like a $25 an hour minimum wage, like Medicare for all, and people who want to end the genocide. We have to focus on them. And I can tell you, the only thing that will induce these people, AOC and whoever else, is if we actually build a fighting mass party for the working class, and then they will come and be the treacherous right wing inside our party. I predict this. That is what will happen. But they are not going to be the drivers of any left movement. They are going to be the gatekeepers against the movement. And I'll tell you one thing. I mean, he was talking about how APAC spent dollars against you. I can tell you one thing. If I ran for Congress, APAC will not be seeking a meeting with me. That's how you hold the line, where the organizations of big business, of billionaires, of the war industry know crystal clear where you stand, because you are unambiguously a fighter for working people. And I do think that we have to relentlessly use the example of Seattle, because this idea that, oh, it's different in Congress and it's city council, it's not fundamentally different, and that idea is flawed. It's this false dichotomy about small versus big, that, or national versus local. It's a false dichotomy, because even in a city like Seattle, they will come after you hard if you fight for working people, and if you build movements, you can win victories. That's the example we need in US Congress as well.
So you're telling me I need to let go of this idea that, just like I sort of evolved from believing that there might be a political utility in the squad to believing there isn't, beyond proving the case that they don't work, that the squad members are not going to go on that political journey, and once arriving where we are, use their kind of clout and platform and kind of credibility from being a elected Congress member to shuttle people toward a genuinely adversarial left cause. You think I need to just let that go? Even with someone like Rashida Tlaib, who, let's just put some of the other issues aside. With respect to Palestine, just on a basic kind of interpersonal level, I don't have any hesitation or who am I to question her commitment when she's a Palestinian American who's been barred by the Israeli government from seeing her, ailing grandmother, her aging grandmother, I do struggle with the idea that it might be unlikely, and it's likely it's probably never going to happen. But there is a part of me that wants to, hold space for the idea that someone like her might get fed up enough, seeing enough of her people get killed by the government she's a part of, and the disrespect that she's been enduring for over a year, and the censoring and all of that, to be like, screw it. Yeah, people should leave the Democratic Party. Just like we had hoped that Bernie and our revolution was going to be something other than they ended up being.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, as far as you mentioned on an interpersonal level, or seeing the humanity in someone, absolutely, I have sympathy for her and anger against the Israeli regime that is preventing her from visiting her ailing mother. I am in the exact same situation as the right-wing Hindu fundamentalist Modi and Bharatiya Janata Party regime in India is refusing to give me a visa. My visa has been denied 3 times. My mother is elderly and she's frail, and I have not seen her for 2.5 years. So I know, and I love her dearly. So I know from a personal standpoint what that feels like. My argument is not that we should not have compassion, and I don't believe that's the case, because I believe the vast majority of us will have compassion on those humane questions. But that's not the question we're debating, though, right? The question we're debating is, so yeah, I mean, your question is, should we put our faith in? I'll reframe your question. For me, it's not about these individuals, and that is why it's helpful to look at it from an analytical standpoint rather than these individuals. The question is, can any solution for working people emerge out of us trying to get these squad individuals to see the light? I don't think so. That's the point. So, but does that mean does that deny the inhumanity of Rashida Tlaib not being able to see her mother? No, absolutely not.
I don't think that's quite my question or my point. My point is that people change their strategy and their choice of analytical approach because of experience, right? The value of the squad is proving that the inside strategy didn't work. The value of working on the Bernie campaigns and being a part of that movement was realizing that that just wasn't a path that was going to be available to us. And so my question is, just like if I could be radicalized by something like that, it seems obvious to me that someone like Rashida Tlaib, who's so much closer to this issue in Gaza and the plight of Palestinians for obvious reasons than I am, must be going crazy, frankly, right now. And that there is a potential energy for her and others for different reasons to come to the same conclusion that I've come to, that we've all come to, and want to work with us, right? And I think it is frankly deplorable. I think it was very disappointing to hear that Jamaal Bowman and implicitly some of the others would have put their ego, their personal feelings of hurt before pursuing something, an action that could have yielded such important dividends and forced the vote. That being said, that is how human nature is. People are like that. I wish they weren't. I wish they were bigger. I wish they weren't so petty. I wish all those things. But understanding that some people are like that, do I want to hold some rhetorical space for the idea that Rashida Tlaib, who seems to be the one of any of them that's closest to having that kind of a break, and or might ultimately get kicked out of office and not have no other choice but to explore more outside strategies, to hold the door open for that. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, no, I get that. I mean, I'm glad you sort of rephrase the question, because I think it is helping us to be clear. Look, she could be going crazy, as you said, about over the question of the genocide. I'm not questioning that. We're not in the business of questioning people's intentions. Like I said, I specifically want to set that question aside because I don't think it is a particularly helpful question. In fact, I feel the question hurts reaching political clarity, because then it becomes a question of, oh, do you believe this person is well-meaning or not? Let's assume she's well-meaning. I have no issues with that. I'm trying to get to a point here. My point is that she may have, and it's not about her. Let's not make it about her. It's about this idea that a person who is in office or who has a prominent position may genuinely grieve about the genocide, may genuinely be angry at the Israeli regime, and still never reach the political conclusions that you and I have reached, simply because that's their political analysis.
Absolutely. But that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying if she does.
Yeah, but that's what I'm coming to. That's what I'm coming to. Yes, but my point, this is what I was going to say, is, but no one's stopping her from reaching that conclusion. My point is, I personally, as a fighter for working people, as somebody who's organizing Worker Strike Back, choose not to be preoccupied with that question. If she wants to join, if she were to call me tomorrow and say, hey, I want to work alongside Worker Strike Back, or I want to build an anti-war movement, will you help me? Absolutely, we will. Because like I said, we're not sectarian, and it's similar to what you were saying to Jamaal Bowman, is that if somebody is willing to fight alongside you on something you strongly believe in, absolutely, we will do that. On the city council, I spend any amount of time trying to get the more left-leaning Democrats on our side, on the side of, it's not about me, it's about, renters, working people, to win those victories. So we do everything in our power to make sure, as you said, that there is an opening for them. But, and I'm not saying you're doing this, I'm saying that the problem with this type of, the analytical problem here is that if you are mainly preoccupied with that, then it does convey, in my view, a wrong impression to working people in that they think that, oh, that's where our strength lies, to try to convince Rashida Tlaib to be on our side. That's where I'm drawing the line. I don't believe that being that sort of just, being over-focused on this question of can she be on our side is actually pointing people away from.
This is a really minor point. This is a really minor point. And I actually
one other thing though. It's not about Tlaib. I mean, I feel like that is not clarifying because it's not about her intention. It's about what actually works. And as long as you're willing to be a gatekeeper for the Democratic Party in some shape or form, you are not helping people reach the conclusion that they need to reach, which is that we need to organize independently. And in my view, that's the main thing. That doesn't mean that if Tlaib wanted to do something, we would stop her. Obviously not. And like I said, I have no problem acknowledging the correct positions she has taken, and those are important. But it's not about her. It's about what is the way that working people can build. That's the question. So that's why I would urge you not to make it about in this individuals and about their intentions.
Right.
That's not the
here's
main thing.
here's my question, Kshama. None of this is about her at all. It's about me. It's about my choices and what language I use rhetorically that makes my movement, the movement that I'm a part of, and my role here as an interlocutor and a podcaster, makes it seem like this is a place where people can come, even if they've been wrong in the past, even if they come from shitty political movements in the past, even if they've had a different approach that I disagreed with and we were antagonistic to each other in the past. This has nothing to do with her. I'm asking a question about how I should conduct myself and the language I should use that makes it more likely that the door seems open for those who start to question the approach that they've taken in the past. The same way that we on the left have no compunctions about criticizing Democrats who are sort of overly dogmatic in the way they castigate MAGA voters, let's say. Trumpies are dumb, stupid hicks, blah, blah, blah. We oppose using that sort of language because we see in the folks that might be offended by that, people who have shared interests to our movement we don't want to feel alienated by our approach, right?
I agree with you, Briahna, but I do have a different approach to this in the sense that, and I'm glad you clarified this further, what you're thinking. I appreciate that. Where you said, like Trumpies are dumb, absolutely. See, but there's a class difference here, and there's also a difference in the power structure in the sense that ordinary people, absolutely, I could not agree more that we actually have to be an extremely welcoming movement while being principled. So we don't agree with people who say, well, all these working people, poor people who voted for Trump, they are to blame. We never say that. We, in fact, talk about how they've been sold out by the Democrats, and there's no left alternative. There's no militant working class alternative. And so they've hung their hat on this Trump idea, and they're very soon going to be disabused of that notion. So we have to be a welcoming movement. In fact, in Workers Strike Back, we have been very explicit about how it does not, in my speech at the organizing conference that we did on February 22nd in Seattle, the day you appeared on the live stream with Due Dissidents, in my speech, I specifically said, it doesn't matter whom you voted for or you didn't vote at all in the election. If you want to fight for a living wage, you want for $25 an hour, if you want to fight for healthcare for all, Medicare for all, then we are in this together. That's what we care about. I don't, however, and this is my difference with you, I don't equate ordinary people to somebody who has a congressional position. Because when you have a congressional position, you are not an ordinary person. You do have a million times bigger obligation to use your position, and it does put you in the crosshairs of the ruling class, and that's what they don't want. Most of them don't want to do, and that's why each of them, their line beyond which they will not cross may be different, and Talib's line may be much better than Bowman's. But my point is that ultimately they are all drawing that line. And so, no, I don't equate my critique of the squad to my being welcoming of ordinary people who voted for Trump. Those are two totally different things. And I did want to go back to the other point you made, which I think is also important, which is that, that Jamaal Bowman and people like him, politicians like him, they kept their petty ego, and that's the reason that they didn't do this. But look, I don't see this as a question of ego. I mean, he may be egoistic. I don't know. I don't know him, but I think this is primarily political, meaning that if he does have an ego, then that's not an egoistic person you see who is cringing to Biden. There's this video where he says, I want to be like you.
Fired up. You're inspired. You got guns. Listen, man, I'm trying to take care of myself. I'm trying to be like you.
That's a person who is acting completely without self-respect. But again, I don't want to characterize these things. I mean, my point is that you could characterize it in that personalized way, but I don't, meaning I use the vocabulary of politics, meaning whom he bows down to and whom he says F you to, which he said on your show, he said F you to, not to you, but to the people who are ordinary people, the left, who's calling him out. So whom he chooses to kiss up to and whom he chooses to say F you to, that is a political question. It's not about his ego or psychology. It is a question of where he wants to stand.
I think that's true. And I think that's a very good point, that that's not what's actually driving him. But again, for me, it's about me and my credibility. So if I had, look, I want to be really clear. People ask me and have said in the comments over the years, I don't understand why Briahna is defending Jimmy Dore. I don't know why she wants to do a hard break with Jimmy Dore. This is why. For one, two reasons. For one, he was an excellent ally, a powerful, strong, unrepentant ally on one of the most important issues in the world to me, which is Medicare for all, at a time when we had a global pandemic and 15 million Americans just thrown off their health care. And he spent time, money, and social capital, not just supporting with live streams and the like, the goal of Force the Vote, but Medicare for all actions afterward. And I honor that he did that. And you can disagree with people, as I disagree with every single person in the world about something, and have narrow criticisms without throwing someone under the bus when they've done something that to me amounts to much more than most of the people that I've interacted with on the left have ever done, frankly. Okay, for one. But for two, I believe that the rhetorical approach that he took at the time was also useful. If someone didn't want to talk to Jimmy Dore because they thought he was being mean, okay, but that energy was necessary and captured what so many people were feeling at the time. And I'm glad that he was in the space, galvanizing energy among a subset of the population that needed that energy and found connection and support from that energy, and that people who thought that was like not exactly their speed had other folks that they could listen to. And so to that end, while I appreciate the role that he played and think it was a positive role, frankly, I also existed, and others existed who were less bombastic than even I, who can do like what I did in that interview, which I think was revealing and necessary. One, Bowman was unlikely to ever sit down with Jimmy Dore, but he was willing to sit down with me. And two, when he started to make the case that the reason he didn't listen to the idea was because of the tone of the pitch, I was able to say to him, well, have I ever said anything to you that was disrespectful? Have I ever called you out on your name? Do you have a specific complaint about the way I conducted myself? And when he can't say yes to that, because I have in fact gone out of my way to make sure that I'm not vulnerable to those kinds of criticisms, it gives me leverage and credibility to an audience who is watching, trying to figure out if I'm right or if he's right. And so I do think, while everyone doesn't have to be doing what I'm doing, I do think that it is useful to have people in the space, to have various interlocutors who are positioning themselves differently, so we can get out the evidence on the table that we need to get out to help people, to convince people to make the decisions that we want them to make, to move the country, to move the movements in the right direction.
Yeah, and don't ever doubt my appreciation of your show. I mean, as I already said, I think that it is extremely useful that you did the Bowman interview, and I'm sure he's not. I mean, if he has any sense in his head, he should feel, oh, like I really exposed myself. But maybe he won't realize it. I don't know. But
I hope he talks to Butch, right? Like, I hope he talks to Professor Ware. He seemed open to it. He seemed to say that he liked his vibe. He liked Butch Ware's vibe. And maybe Butch can get through. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, sorry, it's hard for me to respond to that because I have some serious criticisms of Butch Ware. But that aside,
really?
Yes, I do. But that aside. That aside, as far as you're saying, your role and does it provide a service? Of course, I don't doubt that ever. I wouldn't be sitting here talking to you if I thought that this was not important. And to the extent that somebody like Bowman is willing to come on your show, okay, that's actually very useful. And like I said, it was much less useful to him and much more useful to the working class to be able to see him fully exposed, because he exposed himself, and you did a fantastic job helping to expose him. My point is, though, I was trying to answer the question that you were asking earlier, which is not so much your role as a podcaster and creating this platform that can provide revealing truths to working people, which I think is extremely useful. But you were saying earlier something along the lines of, well, I should stop thinking that they could be moved. That's where, I mean, so it's
Yeah,
one thing to,
that is
those
a
are
different thing. Yeah.
see, yeah, those two different questions. And I was just thinking about, how AOC, I mean, all the veils have been lifted. Like, she went to the DNC and said, I am, that Harris will tirelessly fight to end the genocide or something like that. I mean,
she is working tirelessly to secure a ceasefire in Gaza and bringing hostages home.
She could not have been more dishonest. I mean, it is just beyond the pale. But as far as Jimmy Dore is concerned, again, I think my response to that, what you were saying, is similar to what I was saying about how ordinary people who voted for Trump, I don't hold ordinary people on the same level as congressional Democrats who have a massive platform to do something with, and they don't, and they sell out. So those are two different things. I would put Jimmy Dore in the same category in the sense that I don't agree with everything Jimmy Dore says, but during Force the Vote, yeah, absolutely. Myself and my council office, we were calling for Force the Vote. In fact, we were talking about, we were supporting the rallies you guys were doing and saying we need even bigger rallies. We need to have rank and file union members as part of this so that puts pressure on the labor leadership, which is much less talked about, the role of the labor leadership and how they end up cheerleading the Democratic Party that sells out their own members. So we were very much part of all that. And Jimmy Dore did play a very important role, one of the lead roles in that. There's no question about that. Does that mean I agree with everything that he says? No, absolutely not. And when I disagree, I'll say I disagree. When I agree, I'll say agree. But so for the liberals who were demanding that you cancel Jimmy Dore because they don't agree with him on some other things, no, I don't agree with them. We should not be in the business of canceling. I do want to clarify this, though. When we have a clear criticism of congressional Democrats or Democrats in general, I don't equate that to canceling. We are not canceling them. If they want to wake up tomorrow and join the movement of the working class, they will be welcomed with open arms. So the obstacles are all on their side, what lines they choose to draw. So, but it is my undying obligation to the working class to clarify what role they play. If I start thinking that falsely, incorrectly thinking that somehow me having a very clear and trenchant critique about these squad members is akin to canceling them. Oh, and I should not be I'm against cancel culture. So I should be soft on them. Then I will be doing a disservice to the working class because I won't be clarifying to them what the role of the squad is. So when you're talking about somebody with a certain measure of power to influence political outcomes and they sell you out and you call them out, that is not canceling them. That is actually telling working people, here's the truth. This is what doesn't work. That's why we need independent politics, that type of thing.
Kshama, while we're just on the subject, earlier today, as we're recording, Rashida Tlaib put out a letter with 14 Congress members demanding that the Trump administration immediately release Mahmoud Khalil, the recent Columbia graduate who was secreted away to an unknown location, ostensibly and threatened with deportation, a permanent resident green card holder married to an American who's 8 months pregnant.
Hello?
Only 14 signatures.
Yeah.
Only 14 signatures, and notably absent is Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. Now, that might change between now and when this episode comes up, but to have this initial drop and to have these kind of glaring omissions of those who are supposed to be among the most left flank of elected Democrats does seem to be a pretty wild place to be in. What do you make of this?
Absolutely. I mean, it really is. I mean, it's shocking, but not surprising to see how abysmal the Democratic Party is on this issue, on standing against this completely unjust and horrendous detention of Khalil. And, it sort of sets in motion, right? I mean, he's a green card holder. So what next? Are they going to come after citizens? Are they going to come after people like me who are, who weren't born here but are citizens? So there's no stopping point. Once you let these horrors start unfolding, So absolutely, it is horrendous. But I think, yeah, like you're saying, the main moral of this story is that shockingly, only 14 Democrats are willing to sign this, which shows you how tied to the overall agenda of US imperialism the Democratic Party is, in no less than the Republican Party. And for God's sake, the genocide happened and began happening under Biden. Biden and Harris and the Democratic Party were the instigators of the support for this complete horror show that's unfolding in Palestine. And so ultimately, both the Democrats and Republicans are safeguarders of the interests of US imperialism. And it's not only that, it's also on working people. Trump has been indiscriminately, firing federal employees, including so many disabled veterans, and veterans being 30% of the federal workforce. I mean, this is shocking, right? It really exposes him as somebody who's a con man. He said he's all about veterans, and now he's selling them out left and right. That's just blatant attacks on working people, and also the the impending the threatened attacks on Medicaid, and of course they'll go after Medicare and Social Security. But again, the key question is, what are the Democrats in U.S. Congress doing? They are doing next to nothing to fight against it, and the debate is about, and this Bowman spent a fair bit of time on this in the interview with you, the debating the the extent to which they would do even performative acts, like, will they all walk out, or is it only going to be one Congress member who walks out? I mean, let's be clear, all of that is performative, but this is how abysmal the Democratic Party is. They can't even get it together to do a performative act. Do you know why? Like, there was this whole point where Bowman was saying, why don't we have coordination and all the congressional Democrats walk out? It's not about coordination. It's not like they don't have emails and WhatsApps and gazillion aides to coordinate something. It's again a political question, and it's about the balance of forces, because they may not like the fact that Trump has been elected and they prefer their party being in power, but ultimately their main agenda is to keep the working class in check. And so the reason they did not do a coordinated walkout is lest it send an energizing example to the working class that, hey, maybe we should also we should be acting, we should be organized, we should be doing something. They do not want the working class to get any such dangerous ideas that, hey, we can get organized and we can fight back. That is a contagious idea that they don't want to start that contagion in the first place. And that is why they will never, ever do anything like that, even when it's performative, because of the message it sends to the working class. And let me also tell you, I'm in Seattle right now. In Washington State, we have the governor is a Democrat. The legislature is controlled by the Democratic Party. The Democratic Party has a 59-39 majority in the House of Representatives and 30-19 majority in the Senate. I mean, absolutely blowout decisive majorities. And what are they doing, do you think, right now? They are trying to enact a brutal austerity budget, cutting $7 billion, which means endless cuts to social services that will impact the poorest of the poor, the most vulnerable, marginalized communities of color. And they are demanding that the state employees who are organized with the Washington Federation of State Employees, WFSE, that they take furloughs, which is a mandatory 1 day unpaid day off every month for 2 years. Can you believe this? So it's like shaking poor people for pocket change. That is what they're doing. When this state is richer than ever, we have 13 billionaires in this state. We have more millionaires with every passing day. And the state has the second most regressive tax system in the nation, second only to Florida's. And this is this is the story of the Democratic Party. And unfortunately, the labor leadership is not really organizing the kind of fight back that we need. But one worker strike back member, Josie Ebelhair, she's a social worker. She's a member of WFC Local 889. She brought forward a resolution last night in her locals membership meeting, and they voted unanimously for it, which is calling on the WOFC leadership, this union leadership statewide, to organize a mass protest of thousands in Olympia, which is the capital, on April 9th, which is the first day of the state legislature, and calling for a tax on the rich and, and not having these cuts. And if the leadership did that, that would be fantastic. I don't think that they're preparing to do that right now. We are calling for it. But really what we need is a mass sick out and strike action against the Democrats, both in Washington, in the states, and in Washington, D.C.
Yeah, you're reminding me that I just did Piers Morgan ill-advisedly. And it was for conservatives, including Piers Morgan. And
I haven't watched it yet.
Well,
I'll watch it.
I wouldn't necessarily. I can't watch it. I can't bring myself to. Like, I need like a week after doing something like that to become emotionally regulated enough to be able to watch myself back. If other people want to clip stuff from it for me, so I don't have to go through it because it causes me a lot of emotional anguish to do so.
Can I just interrupt you and say I totally identify with that?
Yeah, like you should have seen me. I was like, I need to go on a run. I need to walk circles in the park. I need to take a nap. I need to watch TV. I need to figure out a way to come down from the adrenaline spike of sitting there for an hour and listening to true buffoonery. But, they ask me a lot and I say no like 9 times out of 10. And I've only done it twice. But the reason I decided to do it this time, every time I go back and forth with the booker, I say, I have my own agenda. Like, I have my own politics and I know what the show wants of me. The show wants me to sit there and be Black and then attribute whatever identitarian argument is happening in the world to me, to frame it as my political priority, even though I never would have been talking about said issue in all likelihood unless it was brought up to me on the show. And then to frame me as only caring about race no matter what words come out of my mouth. So I decline generally to do it if the topic is, there are serious race topics that I'm happy to talk about, but there are a lot of unserious ones that I don't want to talk about. And that I want the topics to be something that gives me an opportunity to talk about working class politics. And so the reason I said yes to this one was there was a lot of talk about Musk and Trump's first, 100 days or whatever it's been, a month, whatever. It feels like 100 days. And what the implications are for the economy, whether or not we're going to have a recession, Democrats not meeting the moment and why. And so there seemed to be opportunities for me to make my case. So when I went into it, I was like, okay, Briahna, every answer, all of your answers have to be, basically, to be honest, I listened to Bernie's stump speech from this oligarchy tour because he's got a lot of good stats in it. He's making a lot of good points. He's doing it in service of sheep herding people back into the Democratic Party, but the rhetoric has a merit. So I pulled a bunch of stats from the Bernie speeches about 60% of the country living paycheck to paycheck, about the bottom 50% of the country having a 7-year less life expectancy than the top 1%, about Donald Trump's tax plan if implemented, raises taxes on the bottom 95% and lowers them on the top 1%. All of the things that while Piers Morgan and the millionaires in the panel don't care about, I'm hoping that people in the audience care about and be receptive to and could make them think differently about Donald Trump, Elon Musk, and the oligarchic administration than if a lib that they might otherwise have on is just sitting there saying Trump is annoying and evil and a racist and all those kinds of things.
As an independent left populist, I think this conversation is exactly why we need a workers' party in this country. You opened, Piers, by mentioning that Trump seems to be admitting that there's going to be, quote, growing pains. It's not just an admission. Republicans have been telegraphing this and pointing specifically to Milei and Argentina as an example of the economic policy they want to pursue. This is not an accident, nor is it a consequence of inheriting Biden's economy, which I have no interest whatsoever to defend. But it is worth noting that Donald Trump is implementing an agenda that is purposefully throwing the country, if not into recession, then toward it. Because we have to ask ourselves the question of who he represents and who he is working for.
But what about my
question? There were 3 billion. There was a lot that was said. I'm sorry, Piers, if I could just respond to a couple of things.
Well, yeah, but I did ask you a straight question. I mean, you can come to the other stuff, but on that specific point about the southern border.
That being said, sorry, this is a long wind up. That being said, the insanity of the replies when I tried to talk about the oligarchy, when I raised the question of who is being prioritized by the Trump administration when he has 3 billionaires standing behind him at inauguration. You know the lines that they like to say. They like to say, "What? You're just mad that they won? They earned a lot of money? How much of Piers Morgan's money do you think should be paid to the poor, Briahna?" It would be stupid of Trump not to listen to the most successful men in America. They obviously are very smart to have earned all of that money. Of course, we want them dictating what happens from a policy perspective in the Trump administration.
You keep criticizing them because they're rich, but they are self-made men. Trump would be insane to not want to include them in our administration and be insane to not receive their advice on how to make our country wealthy again.
And I want to believe that the audience can see through it. But I looked at that comment section, girl, I don't know. I don't know. So I am curious how you're approaching all of this and whether you see there to be like sort of rhetorical opportunities in this moment or not.
I think if you look at the issue-based polls, if you look at the support for Medicare for all, if you look at the support for a $15 an hour minimum wage, which still is an issue because the federal minimum wage, as we know, is $7.25, which is absolutely pitiful. If you look at the support for also ending the wars, on basically every issue, you see the majority of the American working class taking a progressive position, and even to the extent that in this past election, you had the state of Missouri, for example, which went for Trump, but also the majority also voted for a $15 an hour minimum wage ballot measure. You keep saying this stuff, I believe in 2016, you had Florida, which had gone for Trump, and a greater majority than the ones that voted for Trump actually voted for $15 an hour. So you see this over and over again. And in fact, in this past election, it was not only about 15, that was just one of the things that stood out, but also in other states, including Alaska, you had ballot measures voting for women's rights, for abortion protections, and also ballot measure. I believe there was a ballot measure in one of the states, maybe Alaska, that was actually even more complicated and even harder to win, which is, you have to vote no against anti-union policies. And the majority voted no on it, but voted yes for Trump. So you can see that the majority of the working class is pro-union. We have never, in our lifetimes, Briahna, we have never had the working class so pro-union and pro-fight back. All the pet issues of the ruling class, obviously Trump is the one driving this right now, but this is something that the ruling class as a whole and the Democratic and Republican parties together have been salivating over, which is slashing Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security. And one of the reasons they found it so hard to do it is precisely because they are universal programs, which is, it ends up uniting everybody across, no matter what differences there are. If you go after them, the majority of Americans will fight back, regardless of ethnicity, background, and so on and so forth. So if you look at those questions, majority of Americans are vehemently opposed to Trump's plan to permanently extend his 2017 tax cuts for the rich, which we know tax cuts that Biden continued. So this is, again, a bipartisan thing. Large majorities oppose eliminating the repayment plan that helps student loan borrowers and funding cut. They also oppose funding cuts for federal student loans and grants. Over 80% opposes cuts to the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, SNAP, or which is known as food stamps. And a whopping 90% of Americans are against cuts to Medicare and Medicaid. So if you look at these numbers, they don't lie. They don't tell a lie. And let's not forget the whole Luigi Mangione story. 69% of Americans, or I believe maybe even greater, maybe I'm misquoting the number, but maybe even 75% of Americans thought that the main reason that happened was because of the blood sucking by the insurance industry on people who need healthcare. So, it runs the spectrum where the opinion of working class people is. Now, what happens though, and this is where consciousness is complicated, is that because there hasn't been any militant leadership to fight back on a large scale. We have provided that in Seattle, but unfortunately, tragically for the working class, that's a very rare, only example. But on a national scale, we don't have that. And so you have people who are completely angry at both parties. They don't know where to turn. And then in comes Trump acting with his con man act. And some people, would like to believe that maybe he's going to deliver them from this suffering in the same way that people believe that Bernie will deliver them from suffering. But neither of them is going to. They're not the same. Bernie and Trump are not the same, but neither of them is going to deliver working people. And so what we're seeing is this a complicated process of consciousness where actual opinions are very militant and very left, but there's a chasm between that and the leadership being provided. And you see people understandably trying to grasp at whatever is on offer. And that's what you see in all these, comment sections of these shows. So the job of shows like Piers Morgan is to keep whipping up that machine on the right, in the same way that the job of many of the people on the Democratic side, the liberal commentators, is to keep whipping up the machine there, the hatred against people who vote for Trump. And so ultimately, that's why the bedrock of the message that we had in our Workers' Strike Back organizing conference was, we need class war. We need class-based unity, not culture wars, not the ideas of who voted for whom, but do you want to fight for a decent standard of living? Are you angry at the rich? And that is why it's no coincidence, Briahna, that our organizing conference was called Fight the Rich Organizing Conference. And the next day, on February 23rd, this was not live streamed because this was only open to Workers' Strike Back members. We had our inaugural national convention of Workers' Strike Back, and there we had a democratic discussion, debate, and we voted on the Fight the Rich program. And this is the message, and we know it's a winning message. Everywhere we go, people are hungry for this message, hungry to fight, because that clarifies everything. You're fighting the rich. You're not fighting each other. If you're Latino, black, white, it doesn't matter. If you're a working person who are struggling to keep body and soul together, then we're in this fight together.
Yeah, I mean, I would be curious to know what you think of my efforts and if they're worthwhile. I'm disinclined, the way they even supercut the beginning, they did like a supercut of what the whole hour episode was going to be like. And they cut it so that I never said a full sentence and made it just cut me every time I tripped over my words as though I never said, it was really especially despicable, bad, quote unquote, journalism from them. So I'm not inclined to do it again.
No one's talking about bringing down Medicaid and taking out these programs. They're talking about getting the waste and fraud out, which it is obvious. There are 150-year-olds that are getting benefits, 300-year-olds getting benefits.
Let's
not
get
true. The waste and fraud
you have
out.
to rely on lies like that.
I want you to keep more of your money. Do you want me to keep more of my money?
No, because you're a millionaire, Dave Rubin.
How much of Piers' money do you want?
It's not just Gavin Newsom. It's a lot of the left-wingers who I would call woke, because I have no problem with you being a Democrat if you're true to your values. But this woke disease, now that Trump ended it, they want to get on the winning path.
I think the guy's basically the Antichrist. He's the devil incarnate.
Give me another example in the history of war where the attacked country needs to pay for electricity for the country that declared war on them.
Release the hostages, Piers. That's the answer. Release the hostages, and then I'll come on this show and tell you Israel should leave them alone.
But truly, I was so single-minded in my goal. I got out. I did say, I think the first time I was allowed to speak, this is why we need a workers' party. Because none of the people on this panel are reflecting the interest. And to be clear, I'm not a Democrat and have no interest in defending Biden's economy or the Democratic Party, generally speaking. But here's the issue, and then go off on my tangent. But they were like, the woman called me a communist, and I said, and it's like a default. They were like, oh, cutting Medicare and Social Security. You guys have been threatening about grandmothers in the streets since the 90s. Nobody believes that old canard anymore. She didn't say canard. The vocab level wasn't exactly there on this panel, but that's neither here nor there. I mean, it is kind of wild. Here's my point. I was sort of it's sort of wild. I won't say I'm surprised, but it is very much something that we live in a country where you can so openly defend the, not just millionaire class and not just the rich, but the billionaire class full-throatedly on TV and have any credibility whatsoever in any political space that is not like the VIP room at Cipriani's. Like, it's kind of wild. And so I do wonder if this moment is forcing them into the rhetorical positions they took during that episode, and if they are genuinely vulnerable. Because to my ear, it's difficult for me to imagine that doesn't sound completely unhinged to most people, and that there is.
It will sound most unhinged to most people. Yes, I mean, and it's also a question of who ends up commenting on the threads. You know, it's usually people who are just sitting there. That's what they're doing. Some people are even paid to do that. But it doesn't. I don't believe that it reflects the vast majority of people. But I do think that, and as I was saying earlier, I do think that what's happening is, and like you said, it is completely wild to see this sort of open advocacy of billionaires. And you said it much better than I do. Is the what, smoking room at Cipriani's, or what did you say?
VIP room. I don't know.
VIP room. Yes,
Somewhere hang out.
Yes.
Well, let's ask Eric Adams.
well said. Yeah, exactly. Well said. I think and this is where I think the question of the Democratic Party's role and how Trump 2.0 came to power, I think that's at the root of this, because here's the contradiction, right? The anger against the billionaires is visceral. Anger against the billionaires is visceral. I don't care whom you voted for. The majority of Americans are hopping furious at the billionaire class. But what has happened is that the combination of the utter betrayals by the Democratic Party, and right now they are completely discredited at this moment. That doesn't mean we should write obituaries, because they will come back, because that's what the ruling class wants. It wants the working class to oscillate between the Democrats and Republicans. But setting that aside for a second, because the Democratic Party has utterly betrayed the working class in such a fashion, and that combined with the absence of any real militant working class leadership has created this opening for this character, Donald Trump, to emerge on the world stage and suck all the air out of that. And so for a period, there will be some illusions in him. But I don't think that that's going to be permanent. And already I think there is a lot of anger. You know, you see all these videos, these on Instagram and TikTok about how these veterans who said, I voted for Trump and look at what he did. You know, I lost my job. So it's not going to be forever before some of these illusions are broken. The question for us here is, and this has always been the question, how are we going to build the beginnings of that militant fight back, which brings in all the working people, regardless of their ideological fixations, to a fight against the rich? That's where the question lies. But right now we're seeing that complicated, tortured process of consciousness, where on the one hand you have never before seen anger at the billionaire class, and yet you have some people having illusions in Trump, who is surrounded by billionaires, who has a 13 billionaire cabinet.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought that up, because this is the big question, and I've waited to ask. We waited an hour and a half into this interview to actually ask you. You brought this up in the very beginning as well, and I meant to circle back to it, which is like, how could they fight back? We are making these criticisms of Democrats with their paddles and their pink suits, and their unwillingness to even be performative. And there are some that say, well, there's something that they can do anyway. All there is the performative stuff, and you can want them to execute that better and not do those cringe Jasmine Crockett videos or the choose your fighter videos and all of the nonsense that's been percolating around. But still, do you have an idea for what you would like to see? Obviously not the Democrats, but somebody doing in this moment, whether it's union leaders. I know that was it Sean Fain that recently came out in favor of Trump's tariff policy. Yeah. It feels like a weird sort of a limbo of a world. What specifically would you like to see happening, and what do you make of the role that union leadership is playing in this moment, and the role they could be playing?
So as far as, do I have an idea? Absolutely. And it's not an idea that is in the abstract. We have carried out that idea. There is 10 years of evidence from our city council office in Seattle that is available for people to see. And even today, I run into so many people who have never heard of it, but when they hear about it, they're like, oh, really? This can happen? You can actually win this? I mean, we won $15 an hour in 2014, in June of 2014. Nobody thought it could happen. We were accused of being utopian. I was sat down by two powerful Democrats in my own office in City Hall saying, it's all well and good that you rabble-rouse your way into City Hall, but we're here to tell you that City Hall runs on our terms, and you're not going to win any minimum wage increase, let alone 15. These were the words that were told to me. Less than 6 months later, we had won. Why? Because we have the idea. The idea is a fighting strategy that is implacably refusing to put any illusions or faith in the Democratic Party or any official, but instead relies on the strength of working people as a whole, understands the need to build mass movements, and also understands the need for the correct kind of leadership. I am not, you will never find me arguing that movements are spontaneous. No, that's nonsense. I mean, the BLM is a case in point. The George Floyd rebellion had 26 million people on the streets, making it the largest street protest movement in US history. And yet its victories were minimal. In fact, one of the victory that we won that year in 2020, the Amazon tax, that is one of the biggest victories that BLM won. And we won partly because of BLM, but not because of the BLM leaders, or I call them misleaders. We won it despite them. And so one of the reasons we have won these victories is because we relentlessly clarify who's on our side and who's not. In fact, just this last Sunday, we had we have monthly worker strike meetings in many cities, but we also have a national Zoom meeting for people who don't have chapters in their city. And the topic this month that we discussed was the 5 do's and don'ts of building movements. And this is one of the lessons we try to clarify. Name your enemy. That's lesson number 1. Who is on your side and who is not? If movements are not clear about this, then we will be sold down the river. And so we had a leadership, including me, obviously, on the city council, but it was a collective leadership of other socialists alongside myself who are now the leadership of revolutionary workers. We were crystal clear that we are not in the business of trying to ingratiate ourselves or win the favor of the Democrats in City Hall. We don't give a rat's ass what they think about us. We are here for working people, and that means relentlessly telling them these people are not on your side, exposing the Democrats every time they try to vote for an amendment to water down 15. Do you know something? This year, because we won inflation increases as part of the minimum wage, the minimum wage in Seattle is now the highest in the nation. It's $20.76. But you know why we won that? It was an almighty battle to win, to defeat the amendment from the Democrats. I mean, they're all Democrats. I was one socialist. They were all Democrats. So all the bad amendments came from one Democrat or another. There were no Republicans. And it took an almighty battle to defeat the amendment to remove inflation increases. And thanks to that battle, thanks to us winning that battle, we now have $20.76 as the minimum wage. I mean, this is it's not enough. It's nowhere near enough, but it is an absolute lifeline for the most vulnerable working people. Disproportionately among them are Black single moms. So whoever talks about Black rights, we won Black rights by winning them the highest minimum wage. The Amazon tax, it raised $404 million last year. The statewide tax on the wealthy is barely above that. And in one citywide tax, and this year that tax is projected to raise $450 million. And that's for affordable housing. And as part of that, we won $17 million specifically to build affordable housing, publicly owned affordable housing with stable rents for Black working class people and poor people who have been pushed out of the central district where I live, which is a historically Black district which has been denuded of its Black population. And so these are the victories we have won. And so we don't speak in the abstract. We are not preaching. We are telling people, see what we were able to do. This is why we did it. And so learning the lessons of why we won is crucial for how we can win. And so those are the ideas. You asked me, do we have an idea? Well, yes, we do have an idea. We know it can win because it has won. Now we need to take it on a national scale. But the other part of your question was about who will do this. Unfortunately, we cannot hold our breath about, obviously Democrats, we've already talked about them, but even the labor leadership, so yeah, like you said, Sean Fain, who cheerleaded for Kamala Harris, famously at the DNC, he wrote an op-ed for the Washington Post saying, I'm ready to work with Trump. And he's talking about tariffs. And by the way, just speaking as an economist, he is completely wrong about tariffs. Tariffs are bad.
You think so?
Yes. You can have me on another time if you want to talk about tariffs. But no, he's completely wrong about tariffs. Actually, tariffs end up imposing a cost on working people as a whole. And there's lots of economic evidence to show that. But the most despicable thing about this is, of course, for him to say, I'm ready to work with Trump. Are you kidding me? Trump is right now slaughtering federal employee jobs. And he's getting ready to slash Medicaid. So where are the labor leaders who are organizing mass rallies, not to mention strike action and shutting the economy down? That is what we will need. If we want to fight the budget cuts in Washington state or we want to fight Trump, we will need nationally shutting down the economy, because that is the only message that we can, that is our only weapon as working people to withhold our labor on a mass scale. But we have no labor leaders doing that. And then, of course, we have worse than Fain. You have Sean O'Brien, the president of the Teamsters, who is kissing the ring, and he is going on his podcast. He's talking about how immigrant workers are stealing our jobs, and so this is deeply, deeply divisive. We have to, as we say in the labor movement, an injury to one is an injury to all. So we have to hold the line against Trump's attacks on immigrants, on trans people, on people of color, and we have to say we are, and the poor, and that we are either going to win together or we are all going to go down as the working class. So that's why clearly defining this as a class war against the rich is super crucial, but none of the labor leaders are about to do that. So we are not holding our breath. We are small, but we are doggedly pushing forward with Worker Strike Back. And one of the things that we want to do as part of the Fight the Rich campaign that we have launched is in Seattle, we're looking for opportunities to launch a ballot measure fight on a healthcare issue. I don't have details for you yet, but when we do, we will be announcing that. And we need these kinds of concrete battles on a larger scale than Seattle in order to show that this actually works. So if people are watching this and you are excited by this, please join Worker Strike Back.
Yeah, that's a great place to land. I know that people listening are going to be interested. The audience loves it every time you come on. There is an incredible appetite for people who speak in the proactive, realistic, pragmatic, unflinching way that you do. And it's part of why almost immediately after the Bowman episode came out, I was like, what do I need as a palate cleanser? Like, what is a good response to that? It's you. It was talking to you. So I'm so glad you came and spoke with us all today. And please do tell the audience where they should go if they want to follow up and join up in your efforts.
Yeah, people can go to Workers Strike Back, all one word, workersstrikeback.org. You can join us online. You can also, if you live in a city like Boston or Kansas City or Chicago or Seattle, you can come in person to our meetings as well.
Okay, perfect. Wonderful. Thank you again, Kshama Sawant, for joining us on Bad Faith Podcast. Thanks to all of you who subscribe and listen to the full Jamaal Bowman episode from Monday and all the Monday premium episodes. You really enable this podcast to keep going and have opportunities like the ones that we have had over the years to have interviews that I think are genuinely clarifying. And I hope you understand what that project is and why it is that I think it's important to do interviews with people who we know going into it, we're not going to be ideologically aligned, because there are listeners, there are people that I encounter daily that are coming into the fold who don't understand when I say something about distrusting the squad and distrusting AOC. They haven't been on this multi-year long journey with us, kind of slowly talking to labor leaders and former Birdie staffers and all the people who have given kind of contradictory reasonings for their strategic approach, which has again and again failed us over the years and brought us to the point where we're all pretty confident in our distrust and rejection of the Democratic Party and an inside strategy as being something that's going to materially change our world for the better. So thank you for supporting. Thank you for subscribing. I maintain that bad faith is a good name for this podcast, no matter what jabs are thrown at me from Jamaal Bowman or anybody else. And I invite you to take care of yourselves. And as always, keep the faith. Hey YouTube, thanks for watching. Just a reminder that this is a podcast. You can catch an extra premium episode every Monday for $5 a month at patreon.com/badfaithpodcast. That's patreon.com/badfaithpodcast for $5 a month, an extra episode every week. Additionally, please do consider liking this video, subscribing to this channel. It helps us out. It helps independent media beat the algorithm. We appreciate you. And as always, keep the faith.